Mr. Speaker, colleague ministers, parliamentarians, ladies and gentlemen, I remain honored and at the same time humbled to again address the people of St. Lucia through this honorable house to give support to the appropriation bill that was presented on Tuesday evening by the Honorable Prime Minister, our caring leader, the one who has demonstrated in deeds and in words that all St. Lucians are his concern. The theme, transforming our society while empowering our people, is an appropriate and just way to describe what we have embarked on as duly elected members of this government. Mr. Speaker, I support this bill wholeheartedly, especially on behalf of the poor, marginalized, and underprivileged persons who stand to benefit tremendously. And if I were to summarize this bill in 2 words, I would caption it the clean slate bill, for the mere fact that it is a bill that renews and inspires hope. It is a bill that provides wiggle room for persons who feel caught between a rock and a hard place, a window of opportunity, a space to squeeze through, an open door, a relief, a moment to exhale, a cool breeze on an unbearably hot day, a light at the end of a dark tunnel. I cannot help, Mr. Speaker, but to publicly commend and admire our servant leader, the Prime Minister, for constantly seeking innovative ways to bring impactful change and tangible, meaningful relief to the people of St. Lucia. But, Mr. Speaker, on the other hand, and on the other side, I must express my disappointment at the opposition's fight to speak last. Mr. Speaker, I do not know what it means to speak last. Well, you know, Mr. Speaker, I opted to speak first because it does not matter to me whether you speak first or last. For me, it is not so critical what time you speak. First or last, once you put people first, that's what matters. You see, Mr. Speaker, it matters not whether you speak truth in the morning or in the night, whether late or early, during prime time or any time, spoken to kings or to ordinary people, spoken to any party, truth will always be truth. Ek mwen ble répéter ça en créole. Là ou décide pour parler la vérité, pas mêler qui l'est ou dit, en bas qui condition ou dit, la vérité kay toujours la vérité. Et là où décider pour parler mensonge, et bien menti, même si on dit dernier, et bien même si on dit premier, en menteur c'est en menteur, en mensonge c'est en mensonge. Right will always be right, and wrong cannot be right. So speak truth at any time, and every time it will transcend time. And as Martin Luther puts it, right defeated will always be stronger than evil triumphant. So, Mr. Speaker, for the privilege to speak first this morning, I would like to express my sincere thanks and appreciation and gratitude to the people of Castries Southeast constituency. I also wish to thank them for their assistance and support, prayers and encouragement, for their confidence in me. I also wish to thank my wife and daughters for their inspiration, and my mother and sisters for the prayers. Mr. Speaker, the overarching philosophy guiding the work of my ministry, and which will define our obligations under this Appropriation Bill 2022-2023, is aptly captured in the policy vision statement articulated in the draft revised National Policy Protection Policy. Mr. Speaker, in this financial year, the ministry will undertake a number of important interventions and programs towards the progressive realization of an integrated social protection platform for adequate needs, rights, and the development of the full potential of all citizens, paying particular attention to the poorest and most vulnerable populations. Mr. Speaker, we recognize that poverty is a multidimensional concept, comprising of social, economic, and environmental deprivations. We also recognize that to effectively address issues of poverty and vulnerability, we must explore and utilize very appropriate measures and approaches. And so, Mr. Speaker, against this backdrop, and in keeping with the principles articulated in the revised National Social Protection Policy, our approach to social protection will seek to effectively combine measures, interventions, programs that are protective, promotive, preventative, and transformative. Mr. Speaker, protective in that they will provide the necessary support for those living in poverty and protect them from the worst consequences of poverty, that they will offer care, support, and protection to the elderly, the abused, persons with disabilities, and others in need of such care and protection. Promotive, in that they will facilitate access to opportunities for investment, as well as the development for enhancement of people's productive capacity so that they can graduate or be promoted from social assistance programs. Preventative, focusing on resilience building and the implementation of ex-ante measures resilient to prevent persons from falling into poverty as a result of shocks. Importantly as well, our approaches will be transformative in nature and seek to foster inclusiveness and self-reliance. And for a more practical way of visualizing what we will do and why it must be done as per the appropriation bill here, I'm going to share with you some examples of those that will be served. A single mother who at age 21 with 3 or more children, the eldest is 8 years old and physically disabled and remains lying on her back or on her stomach. They reside in a one-room home. She didn't complete secondary school and is unemployed. A single mother, approximately 25 years old, with a disabled child whose father is also the mother's father. She is a rape victim, but also unemployed and homeless. A single mother who, because of domestic violence, is now incarcerated, and her small business of making coconut oil is on hold. Her children are now in some foster care, that she is unable to see their development. A couple with 7 children, 5 to 11. Their housing condition is below standard and the parents are unemployed. Senior persons living alone without care or adequate medicine and basic food items. The housing condition is very poor. Victims who have not recovered from fires and other disasters. The many unemployed youth. The imprisoned youth who are wondering if they will get a second chance on their release from prison. They believe that they can turn their lives around, but are worried that society will not give them a chance. The poor man and woman who is terminally sick. The sick who is on the street and needs food. The many young men and women who are correctional institutions who are seeking ways to move forward, but because they understand that it is not how you start the race of life that matters, but how you finish. The young men and women who are discouraged but need to continue to advance their business ideas, understanding that their contribution to this economy is vital for the survival of all of us. The grandmother who is caring for her grandchildren because their parents are now deceased. Mr. Speaker, from the perspective of the Ministry of Equity, these are the scenarios that drive this government to take the decisions proposed in this current appropriation bill. And to some of the programs, Mr. Speaker, perhaps the most well-known program of my ministry is the Public Assistance Program, PAP, or welfare as it is commonly known. This is the largest cash transfer program in St. Lucia, and prior to October 2020, there were 2,600 households on this program. In response to COVID-19, the ministry fast-tracked the planned expansion of this program to accommodate an additional 1,000 eligible households, bringing the total to 3,600 households, which means we are actually targeting approximately 11,500 persons. Mr. Speaker, in addition to this expansion, an important difference to note in the administration of the program is that the entire household is now recognized as the unit to be focused on and not one or two individuals within the households. You see, Mr. Speaker, with the previous system, it was possible for a household of 10 or 12 to receive a minimum stipend of $215 if one person applied and was deemed eligible for welfare assistance. Whereas in considering the entire household, in keeping with the household assessment eligibility, the maximum of $465 would be applicable. Mr. Speaker, I must also highlight that while this shift to household focus is commendable, this arrangement has doubled the funding required for delivery of the program, given the higher number of large families reaching out for assistance. Consequently, on a monthly basis, the ministry will expend over $1 million on support to most vulnerable under the public assistance program. And in fact, for the 2022-23 financial year, the operational budget of the public assistance program is $16.2 million, and that is only for the cash transfer component, not taking into account the additional support services provided to clients. However, Mr. Speaker, notwithstanding this formidable sum, and notwithstanding the current economic difficulties, the Honorable Prime Minister and this government, given commitment to putting people first, has pledged to provide the required support. Mr. Speaker, this is what it means to care about people, that we make the sacrifice, we commit ourselves, and in spite of difficult economic times, this Prime Minister is committed to providing the additional funds to support people who need. Additionally, Mr. Speaker, the Honorable Prime Minister has directed that payment to public assistance beneficiary households be consistently processed within a time frame to allow them to receive it by the end of the month, similar to persons receiving their salary. So, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, mwen pou di sa Creole. Premier ministre, c'est moun nan ki ka recevoir l'argent tous les mois. Ça yo pa kouye welfare. L'argent les pauvres. Premier ministre dit yo pas supposé recevoir l'argent n'importe là. Yo ni pour recevoir tous les mois, même comme moun qui ka han salaire parce que l'argent est important pour nous. Mr. Speaker, the delays in payment experienced previously will be something of the past. Mr. Speaker, we care about our less fortunate brothers and sisters, and we want to ensure that they are adequately catered for. But Mr. Speaker, even in addressing the short-term needs of households for cash transfers, we do not intend to create a dependency on government or to render the public assistance program a burdensome to taxpayers. We recognize the capacity and the potential of each individual family unit, and we will continue our efforts to develop the human capital and empower people towards independent living. I am therefore to announce that under the Human Capital Resilience Program, the ministry is currently considering a graduation strategy for social assistance program in St. Lucia. This strategy, Mr. Speaker, will be extremely important to guide the household's transition process from social assistance recipient to sustainable independent living. Several graduation pathways have been identified, and in partnership with other ministries and agencies, opportunities will be explored for engaging individuals and households in various ways to support their graduation from assistance programs. Mr. Speaker, we are aware of the many calls to remove persons from the public assistance beneficiary list. But we are mindful that this process must be managed carefully so that persons are not simply removed only to return shortly after in need of assistance. Mr. Speaker, we are very serious about helping people, building or enhancing their capacity and improving their circumstances in a way that they are able to meet the needs of their families. And so, Mr. Speaker, we have identified and designed some concrete programs to make that happen. For example, Mr. Speaker, you may recall the contribution of $450,000 generously pledged by Lucelec towards a social assistance fund to be managed by the St. Lucia Social Development Fund, the SSDF. Mr. Speaker, we have discussed appropriate use of this fund and have developed a project focused on improving the livelihoods of single mothers and former inmates of Bodley's Correctional Facility. For this project, Mr. Speaker, 30 eligible single mothers will be drawn from the beneficiaries list of public assistance program and will be exposed to knowledge and skills and mentorship opportunities to engage in sustainable livelihoods that will benefit their families. Training in soft skills, entrepreneurship, as well as access to startup loans and micro-enterprise advisory support are aspects of this project, which will be implemented by the SSDF in collaboration with the Bell Fund, the Welfare Unit, the Youth Economy Agency, and other key stakeholders. Such an initiative, we expect, Mr. Speaker, will yield tangible results and will have real impact in transforming the lives of the poor and vulnerable. Mr. Speaker, we are also looking at human capacity development as another pathway for graduation from the public assistance program, and have started work on identifying eligible candidates from the public assistance households for TVET relevant training. This, we believe, Mr. Speaker, will provide more sustainable avenues for engagement in productive endeavors and ultimately graduation from public assistance. Mr. Speaker, with respect to the $1.2 million provided for housing assistance, by this Prime Minister, we want to support and promote that our poor households that are deprived will receive assistance. Mr. Speaker, I do not want to venture into housing as a discussion, but Mr. Speaker, in recent times I've heard so much discussion about housing support, as if prior to this administration there was never any sort of housing assistance going on before. Mr. Speaker, we are mindful that housing support ranges from providing maybe a 200 square foot of home space to an individual. But there are persons who have luxurious homes and they use it for investment. Mr. Speaker, we are not in the business for creating investment for persons, but to support persons with need to retrofit their homes. So replacement of roofs, existing floors, to fix a window, to ensure people are more comfortable, and sometimes even to facilitate a small extension to protect a young daughter who is of age, are some of the initiatives that we embark on with our allocation of $1.2 million. So, Mr. Speaker, that must be understood. We do not go on persons' land to build homes for persons because we do not want to be guilty of trespassing. So we provide materials, like in the case of Bokowen, and the community or the persons themselves find the labor to help themselves. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, we will assess the comprehensive need of households and provide a package of support needed to make a difference. Why, Mr. Speaker? Because we are serious about improving the lives of the poor and the vulnerable. Mr. Speaker, as I have said before, we understand our people. We understand the challenges. We will work with everyone as needed to improve the standard of living. Mr. Speaker, we have begun discussions on the provision of prepaid electricity for some of those households. Mr. Speaker, in recent times, we have seen a number of persons seeking assistance for reconnection or payment for electricity bill. Mr. Speaker, I personally engaged Lucelec on the possibility of embarking on prepaid electricity, which is a proper approach. Prepaid electricity, persons could go to a supermarket or an outlet where they can buy electricity, prepaid on their phone, and they can manage what they have purchased. Mr. Speaker, I am extremely happy that I've received correspondence from the manager of Lucelec indicating that in 2023 they will pilot the rollout of prepaid electricity to some of our poor households. Mr. Speaker, this is an important shift. This is a poor approach in dealing with persons having access to basic services like water and those services. Mr. Speaker, it is comforting to know that a single mother can top up electricity with $100 and is sensitive to the fact that it's only $100 of electricity on her phone, and she could monitor how she's using it. This, in a way, would prevent her from being disconnected. And research has shown in places where persons have prepaid electricity, they do not have the incidence of disconnection in the manner that we experience in here. So I could tell those persons, these 3,600 households who are on the public assistance program, who are vulnerable, who are deemed vulnerable and poor, that we are coming not only to provide public assistance, but to find ways of means of making it easier for them to live. Mr. Speaker, in this regard, I would like to thank Lucilec for always coming forward to assist the poor people in St. Lucia when they see there's a need. Mr. Speaker, with respect to the issue of coordinated service delivery and ensuring the right package of support is provided to households, I have also had several policy-level discussions with my ministry and agencies for improvement of internal coordination towards more efficient and effective delivery of services and greater impact. So going forward, the ministry with its various units, research and policy, community services, welfare services, Division of Human Services, the Bell Fund, Upton Girls Garden, the National Conservation Authority, the St. Lucia Social Development Fund, the Boys Training Center, will maintain even closer collaboration for comprehensive support to clients so that they are able to move out of the current circumstances and improve their standard of living. Mr. Speaker, the impact of our social interventions must be felt, and we are determined to utilize various approaches to make this happen. Mr. Speaker, it is not only about the reduction of the statistics on poverty, but also, Mr. Speaker, it is about the principle of equity, social justice, and human rights. Mr. Speaker, aside from the public assistance cash transfer, my ministry facilitates a number of support services to the beneficiaries of the public assistance. Over the last year, Mr. Speaker, we have provided support to burial assistance, medical assistance, emergency housing assistance, and at this time I want to say thank God for the return of the distress fund. Mr. Speaker, many St. Lucians wouldn't know the circumstances that allow us to find emergency housing for people. But through the court system, families sometimes ought to be removed immediately from a home because children are at risk. And the human services is called. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, most of the emergency housing are for families that we need to rent accommodations, sometimes in private areas, Mr. Speaker. And currently we pay monthly almost $8,300 to maintain families in emergency shelters. And there are about 18 families that we currently have that service for, Mr. Speaker. But the numbers are important and it's increasing based on what is happening on the ground, and we need to be in a position to do so. And therefore the distress fund is back, is God sent to help the ordinary people in St. Lucia. Additionally, Mr. Speaker, we will continue the support to 312 children with disabilities. They receive financial support at a rate of $200 per month under the Child Disability Grant Program. 176 children in court-mandated foster care receive $300 monthly, and 88 persons living with HIV, persons living with HIV program receive food vouchers valued at $100 monthly. Mr. Speaker, while these three programs together cost in excess of $1.5 million annually, my ministry is critically assessing the Child Disability Grant and persons living with HIV programs in particular to see how this service can be improved or expanded, as we have noticed some deficiencies with respect to coverage as well as the benefit level. I will return to the child disability later on, Mr. Speaker, but I would like to focus on some of the programs within agencies within the ministry. Mr. Speaker, if you turn your attention to various departments, you look at the St. Lucia Social Development Fund. Mr. Speaker, through its diverse program in the St. Lucia Social Development Fund continues to provide requisite and timely support to persons in need on an annual basis. Through a number of programs, including Hope, which is now back, holistic opportunities for personal empowerment, could me simply see. We're speaking about educational assistance, housing assistance, Mr. Speaker, the Basic Need Trust Fund program, Our Boys Matter. These programs are very important, Mr. Speaker, and while we continue, we are pleased that there are resources. I would like to, through you, inform that we have worked with community-based organizations in the past, and we will continue and we will intensify, Mr. Speaker, especially with our feeding program. So Feed the Poor Ministry, Gaspar Henry, RISE, CC, other community-based, Raise Your Voice. These community-based organizations have always worked with the St. Lucia Social Development Fund in assisting us, and we will continue to provide the support to these agencies for grant support so that they can effectively carry out their own activities on the ground. And we encourage community-based organizations to join the fight in terms of responding to issues on the ground. Government alone cannot do it. So I say thanks to Gaspar Henry, RISE, Rash Cherry, CC, Raise Your Voice in the person like Catherine Silas, and other persons who are involved, some faith-based organizations as well, who have the soup program, feeding people in certain parts, in Soufre. All of these community-based organizations will find support under the HOPE program so that we continue to support our people on the ground. Mr. Speaker, as I mentioned previously, job losses as a result of COVID-19 made it extremely difficult for parents to provide some of the most important basic needs, including school needs for children. And so to ensure access to relevant resources for continuity of learning by all students, the government provided financial support through the SSDF to support families in need. The Educational Access Program, therefore, represents a key social assistant intervention for vulnerable households within all 17 constituencies. Mr. Speaker, a total of $1.8 million was allocated for this program, and over 2,000 households will be benefiting in this assistance. Tuition support, transportation, the procurement of learning devices in collaboration with the Ministry of Education will all be part of this intervention. Mr. Speaker, and I need to take time here to acknowledge a program that came out that we met in by ourselves that was implemented at the St. Lucia Social Development Fund, our Boys Matter program. Mr. Speaker, when something is good, you need to say it's good. Le bon dit bon. So this program is a program we met. It was set up at the SSDF under the last administration. We recognized it, we evaluated it, we saw that it's a good program, and this Prime Minister provided support for its continuation. Mr. Speaker, this is the kind of government that we are, not because we didn't originate an idea that we will take it away. So the Boys Matter program is another SSDF important social assistance program. This program, which commenced in 2018, represents an excellent PPP, public-private partnership, a collaborative effort between the St. Lucia Social Development Fund, Massey Stores, and St. Lucia Electricity Services, Lucilec. Primarily, the program seeks to arrest the pervading challenge in many secondary schools island-wide, where a number of our boys from poor and vulnerable households either drop out of school or graduate from secondary school without literary or technical skills. Mr. Speaker, through this various interventions, this program provides supports in 3 pillars. Importantly, financial support, the psychosocial support, and mentorship. To date, Mr. Speaker, the program has served in excess of 100 boys from Form 2 to Form 5 at 11 secondary schools around the island, and we are seeing positive results. Mr. Speaker, we are not just focused on the young, we also care about our senior citizens as well. And so through the SSDF, we also provide care and assistance to approximately 709 persons under the home care program. This program ensures that our senior citizens island-wide receive adequate care and continue to live dignified lives in the latter years. The program, which also employed 506 caregivers, also provide basic sanitary and hygiene supplies in cases where they are needed. Mr. Speaker, our elderly have a right to a dignified living and at this stage of their life. For me, Mr. Speaker, this is an extremely important program, one which I'm happy that it has continued and it is funded and it is strengthened for greater effectiveness based on the recommendation of a recently concluded evaluation. Notice, Mr. Speaker, for the Boys Matter program, we evaluated it and we kept it, and it's funded. For the elder care program, we evaluated it immediately and we are strengthening it. Mr. Speaker, and to the Basic Needs Trust Fund program, it is also implemented through the SSDF. This program is in its 10th cycle. It is the oldest social program here in St. Lucia, being supported by grant funds from the St. Lucia Social Development Fund. It is where the CDB is providing 95% of the grant and the government is providing only 5%. And for this cycle, a number of projects have been identified for implementation up until 2024 on the various components. These are the livelihood sector, the education sector, water and sanitation sector, and access and drainage sector. Under the livelihood sector, there's an Artscape development project in partnership with the Cultural Development Foundation. Phase 2 of the Grosley Music Studio located at the Grosley HRDC for equipment, furnishing and operationalization of the studios. Aquaponics for sustainable food production, training of trainers, and some residents in aquaponics for Larissus Viewfort. Green opportunity for life development training in technical and agricultural areas, Regold project, that's at NSDC. Under the education sector, rehabilitation of the Babono Combined School to include pre-kindergarten class, upgrade of the Entripo Early Childhood Development Center or Daycare Center as it was previously called, rehabilitation of the Bishop Charles Gaje Primary School in Masha to include pre-garden classes, construction of an Early Childhood Development Center in Labey, rehabilitation of the Lakwa Mengo Combined School to include pre-garden class, rehabilitation of a block wall at the Soufre Primary School to include demolition of the roof, plumbing, electrical, tiling, and furnishing, establishment of a music training after-school program in Strozel, financial assistance to meet the cost of instruments, rehabilitation of a food and nutrition health laboratory at the Viewfort Comprehensive Secondary School. Water and sanitation include water and sanitation includes the installation of a water tank, almost 100,000 gallons, and lines at Victoria Strozel. And for access and drainage, construction of a road at Cronglands, Goodlands, and Dorado Ancillary. Mr. Speaker, the total cost of the BNTF 10 is a little over $4.9 million. Mr. Speaker, no, there's no doctrine that seeks to keep anybody out. In fact, if you notice, Roselle is getting even more in terms of the amount. Yeah, yes, more than you. You're only getting a studio. Mr. Speaker, there are a number of other projects being implemented through the ministry, but I will focus briefly on two of them, the Human Capital Resilience and the SDG Fund Joint Program. The Human Capital Resilience Project, Mr. Speaker, was operationalized in 2020 as an important initiative to address issues of poverty, vulnerability to shocks, and youth employment in St. Lucia. This project, which is supported by the World Bank, also supports the government two-pronged strategy for building greater human capital and resilience. Through this project, Mr. Speaker, my ministry is seeking to drive a comprehensive reform of the existing social protection system and has facilitated or is currently engaged in the following activities. recertification and expansion of the public assistance program, which is near completion, review and update the National Social Protection Policy and Implementation Plan. Mr. Speaker, on this matter, I wish to announce that the final draft of this policy, which was developed through a participatory approach, will be subjected to further community consultation next month. And this is important as we need to ensure that persons are aware and have contributed to the final document, which will guide what we do and how we do it. Mr. Speaker, once this is done, the policy and action plan will be brought to Cabinet for approval and officially adopted as our guide, our social protection work plan. However, Mr. Speaker, I must pause here to say that everyone that no matter how good this document is, the communal ownership, the collaboration, working together in delivering social protection services is what will bring life to a social policy. As such, we should not just be content with the completion of this document, but rather I implore everyone to join hands with practitioners within the social sector to address the social issues confronting us and to uplift our vulnerable brothers and sisters as necessary. Mr. Speaker, we are also at an advanced stage of the development of a graduation strategy for social assistance program in St. Lucia. Mr. Speaker, I spoke earlier about the importance of equipping households with the right skills to facilitate graduation from social assistance program, and so I look forward to the conclusion of this consultancy of this strategy and subsequent results. Mr. Speaker, under the project, a communication strategy and implementation support plan for social protection in the Ministry of Equity is also being developed. Mr. Speaker, I would like to be guided by how much time I have left.
23 minutes.
Thank you. This is important, Mr. Speaker, as our people have the right to know what services are available and where and how they can be accessed. Mr. Speaker, also relating to Kudme Setlisi and Public Assistance Program, we will develop the relevant documentation operations manual to guide appropriate implementation. Mr. Speaker, we are streamlining, we are strengthening, we are improving for best use of the scarce resources while delivering quality and efficient service. Later on, Mr. Speaker, the ministry will focus on the establishment of an integrated social information system, which will include a social registry and a central beneficiary registry. We expect that this system will be interoperable with other information management systems across public service and will significantly improve data management for decision making. There is also the benefit of harmonized delivery of services, which of course lend itself to maximizing efficiencies. Mr. Speaker, through the implementation of the SDG Joint Fund Program, the ministry has focused on the use of research, analysis, and monitoring and evaluation to support the evidence-based development of an adaptive social protection system. Specifically, through the execution of these activities, the ministry was able to generate evidence which will inform practice for improved emergency preparedness and response linked to a more flexible national social protection system. With support from the UN partners, the ministry has developed a vulnerability index for St. Lucia as a targeting tool for shock disaster response. Mr. Speaker, a vulnerability index is important. Mr. Speaker, I recall some time ago, St. Lucians were, making noise about who was being served food during COVID, who were running after a truck with food saying that they're not being given. And there's this big noise about people being left or being serving because of political preference was the talk of the day. Mr. Speaker, the vulnerability index, as I've seen it, is, while is it a complex mathematical formula, but it takes the SLNet 3 that identify who is poor and subject it to further analysis to determine among the poor who should be given priority. So when there's a disaster, that tool is implemented so we know if we are distributing food, who should be who should receive first as a result of the disaster. And this is what I love about the Vulnerability Index. This tool, which can be used to prioritize persons impacted by disasters or shocks for assistance, was piloted last year with good results. Mr. Speaker, it is our intention to modify this tool so that it can also assist in identifying priority population based on hazard exposure, which can then inform mitigation or risk reduction measures and response. Mr. Speaker, while some persons may not yet see the value of targeting, and I know sometimes I'm referred to in some quarters as SLNet, I will emphasize that with limited resources, it is imperative that we find ways to prioritize and to direct resources to those most in need. Targeting, therefore, is critical for us here in St. Lucia because resources are scarce. Therefore, working with the World Food Programme, the ministry will continue to improve the tool for application when needed. Under this project, Mr. Speaker, there is also an ongoing arrangement to review and update the National Social Protection Bill, which was developed in 2015 but never enacted. Mr. Speaker, we will agree that the 1967 Public Assistance Act is outdated, and as such focus on strengthening the social protection legal framework is both necessary and timely. Mr. Speaker, other important research work which will guide policy formulation have also been undertaken under this project, as well as the development of standard operating procedures to guide practical operations with respect to shock response using social protection programs or instruments. Mr. Speaker, we are happy for the support of all donors, and we express our sincere appreciation and gratitude for the assistance and support received. Mr. Speaker, we remain committed to strengthening the social protection system and closing the inequality gap, the Gini coefficient. Mr. Speaker, we must reduce this inequality that continues to place some of our people at one end of the spectrum and others at the other. It is that we contend with, Mr. Speaker, sometimes that you see it play out everywhere in St. Lucia. We will therefore continue to manage the investment made in our people, expanding coverage as practical and facilitating the delivery of a comprehensive range of services to meet the needs of those most vulnerable. In summary, Mr. Speaker, we will ensure the following during this financial year as we advance ongoing social protection reform: strengthening the regulatory and policy framework for social protection through the enactment of Social Protection Act, as well as the approval of the revised social protection policy and implementation plan. Finalization of the graduation strategy and programs so that individuals and households can graduate from social assistance programs and enjoy independent living. Rationalization of existing social programs to ensure that the appropriate level of assistance reaches those most in need, and in an effort to effectively improve their circumstances. Strengthening existing social interventions and programs to effectively support youth at risk and vulnerable households. Strengthening delivery systems and institutions for effective and efficient delivery of social protection programs. Mr. Speaker, the ministry experimented with digital payments last year to a small group of individuals, and this was well received. Recognizing the vulnerability of our islands to disasters and noting that financial institutions may not be operating after a disaster, we seek to expand these digital payment options during this year. Mr. Speaker, other areas of focus include the development of an integrated social information system to support a more coordinated delivery of social assistance programs, thereby significantly reducing wastage and optimizing scarce resources, and exploring the feasibility of establishing a social insurance scheme in St. Lucia through partnership arrangement with the NIC and other stakeholders. Mr. Speaker, there are a number of other initiatives that are very dear to me which I am seeking to operationalize through my ministry. One such area being explored is that of the establishment of a child rehabilitation center. to provide targeted programming and intervention geared towards the protection, education, and rehabilitation and reintegration of children within the child justice system. It is the vision that this center will effectively replace the Boys Training Center and will be established at a different location. I've had conversation with
Member of Castry Southeast, you have 15 minutes left.
Thank you. Sufficient time to conclude. So it is the vision of that this center, the Child Rehabilitation Center, will effectively replace the Boys Training Center and will be established at a different location to the existing facility. Mr. Speaker, the concept of this facility has been developed, and we have had preliminary discussions with the CDB on this project. We are also actively exploring all options for the establishment of this facility, which I believe is extremely critical at this time. Alongside the establishment of this facility, Mr. Speaker, the ministry has a vision for an effective aftercare program for youth transitioning from juvenile institution and has developed a concept for institutionalization of this program. This program is intended to support the services of the Child Rehabilitation Center with a focus on the re-entry or reintegration of children into the society. And Mr. Speaker, as an extension of support to the center and aftercare program, we have also envisaged the establishment of a youth safe house with services that reinforce and complement what exists in the rehabilitation center and the aftercare program. Mr. Speaker, the youth safe house will serve as a shelter for vulnerable youth who are experiencing homelessness or home dysfunctions that may compromise their ability to live pro-social lifestyle until they are able to live independently. The services will be provided at this facility will include a safe place to live, psychosocial support by caseworkers to ensure compliance with planning goals, opportunities for skill development, and financial resources for youth safe house entrepreneurial programs, life and social skills. Mr. Speaker, yet another program of importance to us at the Ministry of Equity is the National Mentorship Program. We believe that such a program can be a powerful intervention for addressing some of our social issues being manifested in the society. Acknowledging the value of role models in helping to shape behavior, attitudes of others, such an approach can complement existing interventions. Under the JJRP Last Mile Project, the ministry intends to develop the framework for this program, which will be implemented later on. Mr. Speaker, still on the initiative pertaining to children, to date, St. Lucia has adopted and passed 3 of 5 OECS family law bills. The Child Justice Act, the Child Care and Protection and Adoption Act was passed in 2018, and the Domestic Violence Act was passed in 2022. Still outstanding are the status of children and child maintenance legislation. During this fiscal year, Mr. Speaker, the ministry through the Division of Human Services will bring these into focus for relevant consultation and subsequent drafting. Mr. Speaker, in this financial year, we have also committed to strengthening the Division of Human Services in an effort to increase its capacity for addressing the range of social issues being brought to its attention for resolution. Mr. Speaker, the issues are many. The requests are mounting and the demands are unrelenting, and therefore we must adequately support our frontline workers there. Mr. Speaker, earlier I promised to speak a little on children with disability and on some of the issues we are confronted with. Mr. Speaker, the Ministry of Equity provides a small grant of $200 monthly to children with moderate to severe disabilities up to the age of 21. While this may assist in providing some basic needs, the ministry is concerned about the social needs of those children, as in many cases they are kept within the confines of their homes. There are also instances which have been brought to my attention, Mr. Speaker, where parents, particularly single mothers, are unable to work to provide for herself and her child because she must remain home to care for her child who has a disability. Given this, Mr. Speaker, the ministry has considered the establishment of a residential facility and daycare center for children with disabilities where they can socialize and participate in activities as appropriate under the care of and supervision of trained personnel. Such a facility will allow single parents, single mothers with a child or children with disabilities to participate in the labor market, knowing that the child is in a safe environment. Mr. Speaker, this is a dire need, and we hope to encounter little delays in the realization of this facility. We have commenced dialogue with key stakeholders on this initiative, and as it relates to the design conceptualization and the eventual establishment, I look forward with much anticipation to securing the necessary financial resources for the establishment of this center. Mr. Speaker, this year will be a busy one for the Ministry of Equity. As I speak, we are at a project appraisal stage with the CDB for a $14 million dollars COVID response project, which we expect to roll out by July 2022. This project has several components, including income support for persons who are still unemployed, having lost their jobs as a result of COVID-19, support for feeding the homeless, support for learning continuity among vulnerable groups, BTC, Uptowns, New Beginning Transit Home, and all these special education schools, horizontal expansion of the public assistance program, focusing on support for over 800 eligible households on the waiting list, support to 114 children with disabilities on the waiting list, and a vertical expansion of persons living with HIV program to increase the food voucher from $100 to $200, and the foster care program increased from $300 to $400 for the duration of the project. Mr. Speaker, we are also working with the CDB on the design of a $4 million dollars social resilience project, which we intend to launch next year. Mr. Speaker, we have been careful to ensure that activities across the various projects do not duplicate efforts, but rather are complementary in nature and support the broad outcomes of the social protection reform. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, this social resilience project will focus on two main components: institutional strengthening and capacity building. Mr. Speaker, just to give some brief insights on the institutional strengthening component project activities, we'll focus on strengthening the digitized payment platform for public assistance beneficiaries, review of NIC to ascertain modality of incorporating an unemployment insurance system to strengthen resilience of its operations, particularly in response to increased levels of unemployment claims arising during the period of shock crisis, and 3, the establishment of a monitoring and evaluation system to track the impact of financial support to beneficiaries of Bail Fund. The capacity building component, Mr. Speaker, will focus on 1, strengthening the psychosocial and mental health training programs for counselors and social workers, supporting small and micro enterprises through the James Belgrave Micro Enterprise Development Fund, and strengthening work and rich apprenticeship programs to support short-term employment. Mr. Speaker, this government cares about people. We understand that there are those among us who need assistance to get out of challenging and unpleasant circumstances. We understand the need for an inclusive social protection system to support the poor and vulnerable. We understand the significance of such a system as a critical component of human development and also as a conduit for achieving a wider national development goals. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, through resource provision as well as capacity building, we will strengthen our agencies and departments to continue to work with our people and for our people. We will continue to invest available resources in building human capital towards sustainable national development. Finally, Mr. Speaker, I want to remind us that it is critical that St. Lucians listening will analyze everything that is said. Mr. Speaker, it is Ann Thompson in a book entitled Critical Reasoning. She intimated that we have some ideas about whom to trust to give us correct information on subjects which are less familiar to us. Mr. Speaker, I understand and I know that St. Lucians trust the information coming from this side. I wish to say with what has been said, I trust Philip G. Pierre as a person. I trust the Minister of Finance. I trust the Honorable Prime Minister that he will always consider bread, justice, and freedom as we embark on this road. Mr. Speaker, we prayed every Monday when we have, and God has answered our prayers. And the fruit of the Spirit we all can see. Mr. Speaker, I have no doubt that when I listened to the presentation from our leader, that even while we sat in cabinet, everything flowed in a way that even we were surprised to capture the collective in what we have actually put together in the rooms over so many months. Mr. Speaker, for those who didn't believe, they can all see it today. So, Mr. Speaker, I'm extremely happy about the strides that we've made. Mr. Speaker, I think there is a good spirit out there. The light of hope seems to have touched the minds of a few. It is starting to spread like COVID-19. We can call our neighbors. We can call those in the diaspora. We could call our friends. We can say, listen to the programs and plans of this government. It provides an opportunity. It provides a light in a dark tunnel. It provides a second chance to our people. I have no doubt, Mr. Speaker, that as we remain true to what we have started and as we work hard, tirelessly, to bring about the change that is needed for our people, that I think it would be a blessing not just to them but to all of us here. So today, Mr. Speaker, I wish to ask God blessings upon all of us here and all of the work that we have done thus far, that He multiplies it and that it reaches beyond those we are just serving. I want to thank you this morning, colleague members, and to you, Mr. Speaker, for your patience.